Hi everyone, my name's Tim, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about some Jack London short stories. So in this year, I'm trying to read a different Jack London book every month, and this was my challenge for March. I bought this book in London when I took my kids to the Tate Modern, an art gallery, and on the South Bank by the River Thames, there are like booksellers, and I found this. This is To Build a Fire and Other Stories by Jack London. This is published by Reader's Digest. So there was one other version of this that had like a little cutout, like a little almost newspaper article thing, but the spine was ruined, so it wasn't really used that great. This one, the spine is good. There's some stains, and it doesn't smell great, but yeah. So I've just finished reading these. There are 20 short stories in here, and I find reviewing collections of short stories quite difficult because some you like more than others. Some really take you out of it. How do you put them together? How do you put the flow of them all together? And these were written by Jack London over a period of years. These have been collated by Reader's Digest. Jack London wrote a whole load of short stories for magazines and things like that. So what I'm going to do is there are 20 stories in here, and I'm going to rank them. I'm going to start with the one that's 20th, give a little bit of detail about it, and then move up until we get to number 1. First thing that comes out in terms of themes here across the short stories are how nature is unforgiving and life can be unforgiving. A lot of them have sad endings, but realistic ones, and how, I think the nature, scenery, the location plays a big aspect in a lot of these stories. Not all of them, but a lot. Something that does come across is a couple of quite humorous bits. We also have changes in location. So you think of Jack London, you think of the Yukon, Call of the Wild, White Fang, the wilderness, but quite a few of these actually take place in Polynesia, Hawaii. There's also a couple of like sport-related ones, which I find quite interesting. So let's just get into it. So the first one, the 20th short story, my least favourite short story, was called The House of Pride. And this was set in Polynesia somewhere, I can't quite remember. And it was about a man whose father or grandfather it's his father, was the governor of the island and a Jesuit priest, I believe. A man of God. And his son, who's the main character, was like the image of his father, and he took himself great pride in his piousness. And there was another person who was half white, half Hawaiian, and lived life to the max and had fun and had a good time. And the main character hated this guy and wanted to get rid of him. And then you found out through the story that they were actually half brothers, and the guy who's his dad, who he held up as a paragon of virtue, maybe was not a paragon of virtue and had some extramarital affairs. And he never knew that they were brothers, the main character, but the other guy did, and the other guy kept protecting him, and the main character was just getting really annoyed by him being around all the time. So he actually pays him off. He pays him to go to a different set of Polynesian islands, to just go away. It was okay. I liked seeing the main character like be fallen, but it was a bit wordy and it was a bit over the top, I thought. Next is On the Makaloa Mat, 19th place. This is the longest short story in here, and it doesn't need to be that long. It's set in Hawaii. You've got two women in their old age talking to each other about their youth, and how one of them was married off to a rich white man because it would be good for him, good for her. He may not be loving, but he's not a bad person. He's just very grey, very miserly, makes lots of money but doesn't spend anything. They have like the worst bedding. They eat porridge for every breakfast. They live very meager lives, but they have she now has a lot of wealth. But she talks about how one summer she went to a different island and met the prince Lilo, and she just fell in love with him, and fell in love with not just him but everything he stood for in terms of living in the moment and being present in life and enjoying every step of the way. And Lilo, the prince, doesn't live a very long life. We don't know what happens to him, but he dies very young. And they're like, oh, because he burned so brightly. But then her husband, who lived a very meager, grey, bland life, also died very young. So it was like he was always saving for tomorrow, and he never got to see it. So it was okay. I just thought it was a bit long because you had the framing narrative of that took up quite a lot of space. Next is in 18th place is the Pearls of Parlay. Again, another Polynesian one. I don't think there's a theme. In terms of there's some Polynesian ones at the top as well, but this is about a man who went a bit crazy and is selling off his pearl collection of pearls, and there are ships coming in from all around the world to try and buy these pearls at auction because this guy was a sailor and he just took over the island, took over the natives with an iron fist. But what happens is there is a huge hurricane, and basically all the ships are destroyed. And so all of these people come to find these pearls, and they end up finding death. The reason it's a really cool story, but I still don't know that many parts of a ship, and I found the descriptions of what was happening in the storm and where people were going, and people were going between ships and climbing on different parts of the ship, and different parts of the ship were breaking off. I just found it really hard to figure out what was going on because I just don't know the terminology. So that's why it's a bit lower. Number 20, 19, 18, 17 is To the Man on Trial. This is set in the north, set in the Arctic, in the Yukon, and this is, I think, I'm trying to remember, this is one of the earlier ones, and it's about a man who's like running away from the law, and he comes in and he's like on the run, and he's been like running his dogs for days, and then they're like trying to find out what's up about him, and he then is chased by seemingly the police, but he's like, I'm innocent, I'm being set up, and the other explorers back him. They don't go to the authorities. They say, oh, we've never seen him, or we haven't, or they say, oh, he went like 3 days ago, so they think he's really far ahead, and all that. Like, it was quite interesting. It was quite a short one. I don't really remember a ton of it, so that's probably why it's a bit lower. But I liked how there's a camaraderie amongst these explorers who are out basically killing themselves to find gold in the Yukon. Number 16 is Nambok the Unveracious. This is another one set in the north, and it's about this kind of the humor comes across quite a lot in this, where Nambok is part of this very small tribe of Inuit people, and he goes on this huge adventure, and eventually he comes back to the tribe, and he tells them about these things. Like, oh, you know the size of a canoe that we have? There's something that's like 400 times the size of a canoe, and it's not made of skin. It's made of wood, and there's either bigger ones made of metal, but metal sinks. How does the metal not sink? Well, because and he talks about trains, and they don't understand what trains are, and he talks about his life, and then he always wanted to come back home, and he does, and they don't believe him. They think that he's a ghost. They think that he is an evil spirit sent in the form of Nambok, so they send him away, likely to die, because they just don't believe anything he says. They don't believe he's him. So it's quite funny, but again, quite sad at the end. Number 15 is The Nightborn. So this is about a woman who runs who now is the lead of a tribe of Inuit in the north, and she talks about, well, it's a framing narrative of a guy talking about his life, and he talks about how he met this woman, and she was married to a guy and she was just working in a kitchen in Alaska, in the town, like not living a life, and she was like, I'm not dayborn. I'm not born for this, to be confined. I am born to be free and in nature, and to live by night, and to live my own life. So she just runs away. And she meets this explorer who's telling the story, and they fall in love, and she asks him to stay, and he doesn't stay, and he regrets it. So I thought it was okay. I thought it was a bit strange how the woman was just like, what I really need out here is a man. I was like, yeah, you could probably need more than that. But like, as in, she had everything. Why was she? She was just desperate for a man, which is a bit strange. Number 14 is A Relic of the Pliocene. Now, this is, again, it's like a story of a story. So there's these hunters in the north, and one of them tells a story about a man who says he killed a mammoth, a woolly mammoth, creatures that have been dead for thousands of years. He found one, and it was alive, and he killed it. And it's a story of how he killed it. So it's quite silly in the fact that it's quite fantastical, as in he's telling the story of him killing a mammoth. But it's very detailed on how, with just one knife, you can kill a giant beast over days and days and days, and it ends up being very grim, I think, and quite cruel to the animal. But in the end, you don't even know if the man is telling the truth or not. Then at number 14, I want to say I should have put a list, like put numbers on my list. So 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14. 14 was Relic of the Pliocene. 13 is The Wonder of Woman. This is about. I'm trying to remember what this is about. I think this is about the tribe. There's a tribe of people in the north, and they are made from people found and captured by this tribe. So it's an Inuit tribe, but it's a real mix of people. There's French, there's English, there's Americans, there's Inuit from other tribes. It's just a real collection. And it's about this guy, and I think he falls in love. Well, it's called The Wonder of Woman. I'm trying to remember, and he falls in love with this woman, and he's trying to escape. And I think it's like, if he escapes, then they will hunt him down. And he will die. And I think he gives up. I'm trying to remember, because this was, again, early on in the collection. I started reading this like over a month ago. I think it might be another framing narrative of a guy telling the story when he's older. I can't remember. But one thing I really liked about it, that made it up the list, was this idea of this hodgepodge tribe of people. I found you in the wilderness. I saved your life. Therefore, you owe me your life. So you need to be in my tribe, and you're not allowed to leave. Like, that was like, they're saviors, but they're also captors. I thought it was quite interesting. Number 12 is The Heathen. So The Heathen is a Polynesian one, and it's just this very bizarre story. I read it as incredibly queer-coded, but it might not be, where these two men are just basically in love with each other, and they call each other brothers, and it's about the heathen is a man who doesn't take religion at all. He keeps to his own. This is set in Polynesia, and they're together for like all their whole lives, basically, and they keep saving each other, and they swap names as a way to show their bond, because it's not gay. It's gay. I think it is anyway. And yeah, I just thought it was a really nice story about these two men who loved each other very, very much. And in the end, one of them makes a dreaded sacrifice to save the other. And it's incredibly saddening. Next, at number 11, is a story called Mauki, or Morki. So when I first read this, I thought I almost didn't finish the story. I almost skipped it, because the start of it has an incredibly... a description of someone of a different colour skin, which you would not say today in any stretch of the word. And I thought, oh, that's a real shame, because they hadn't done, like, I haven't seen too many parts of that. But I kind of kept going through it, and it actually ended up being visceral and brutal. It's about a man, Mauki, who is very small and slight, who is taken from one island, basically enslaved, and he has to work for this man who is horrible. It's like 12 Years a Slave. You know, it is brutal, but what happens is, in the end, he figures out a way to get his master, and he gets him, and he really enjoys destroying this man. And it is grim and harsh, but very dramatic, and you could see the pent up anxiety and rage in this guy as he keeps trying to escape. And I think one thing as well is that he's sold to a company, so like he puts his fingers down. They say that he's going to work. He owes them 4 years' labor, so it's like enforced. It's slavery by another name, and he keeps trying to escape, and you keep seeing the build up of his time meant to work for this company that he owes them. Yeah, and in the end, he escapes. But the way that he kills his master is brutal, and like the master was an incredibly bad man to everybody. It wasn't, that he was a bad guy, and it's nice to see a bad guy get his comeuppance. Number 10, we're in the top 10, we're halfway, is a story called Lost Face. This I thought was really funny, in a very dark way. So there's a tribe, it's in the north, there's a tribe of locals, and they are killing and torturing these Russians who have abused them. They made them set up a camp, they used them as slaves, basically, and then there's been an uprising. This guy, he's like the last guy left, and he's trying to think of how to save his life. He's like, I need to try and save my life. And that's where you come from. And then he makes a decision in his mind, which you don't see until the end, which is, I've got medicine that if I put it on my neck, it can deflect any blow. So I need these ingredients. And the chief is like, yeah, okay, I don't believe you, but no, show me. So the guy gets like an extra 2 days reprieve to try and make this medicine on his neck that can deflect any axe blow. And in the end, it doesn't work, and the man dies instantly as his head is chopped off. But the man got to go out on his own terms, and he wasn't tortured, and it wasn't painful, and he got an extra 2 days life out of it, while the chief is the one with lost face because he's embarrassed in front of his group. And I think he ends up leaving the group because he's so embarrassed to be fooled by this man with his that the idea of a medicine that can make your skin invulnerable is silly. Yeah, so I thought that was really good. I really like that. And quite a twist at the end when, like, you're like, how's he going to save his life? This medicine doesn't work, but how's he going to save his life? And it wasn't about that. It was about just going out on your own terms. It's quite a long video, sorry about this. Number 9 is All Gold Canyon. This is set in the Yukon, and it's about a man finding the best gold, the best site of gold. And one thing I really liked about this was how he just finds it by accident. And it goes very much into the detail of how to sift for gold, which I quite enjoyed. And he's trying to find that sweet spot, and he keeps moving up this river to try and find that sweet spot. And then he finds it, and then you have the problem, how are you going to move this gold? And then the guy turns up and tries to kill him because it's about gold. I really liked it. I thought it was great. Number 8 was my first 5 stars story. So all the top 8, I think, are 5-star stories. Is The White Silence, and it's about these, set in the snow, and it's about these 3 explorers, and they suffer tremendous hardship and accidents, and then they have to make the call on, do you all stay together and potentially all die, or do you leave people behind? Which I thought was really interesting. It's one of the toughest choices you have to make, you know what I mean? And quite brutal. And again, the scenery and the temperature played such a big part. Then at number 7, we have the last story in here. It's called The Apostate. And this, I think, is the most different, I would say. You don't really get a sense of where it's set. I think everyone speaks in kind of American accents. But it feels very Dickensian to me. It's about a boy working in factories. All he does is work in factories. And he has to lie about his age because there's laws about kids working in factories. But in the end, over years and years and years, he works in these different factories, and he gets sick and he goes deaf from the machines, and his back is hunched and his lungs are collapsed because he's so hunched over working in these factories. And in the end, he gets sick and he realizes what it's like to not be in a factory, and he talks about how many movements he makes because he's so in the factories. He's like working, he's like tying on milk bottles or doing bobbins and things like that, and he's doing like millions of movements a day. And he was like, I laid in bed and I did no movements, and I feel like I got my life back. So he's the apostate because he leaves his family, and his mum's like, "You're abandoning us," and he's like, "Well, you abandoned me. My younger brother, he's going to go to school. He's going to school because I'm paying for it. I'm, you sacrificed me for my younger brother, and I don't have a life." And he like waddles off because even though he's only at that point like 16, 17, he's a hunch of a man and he doesn't have long to live because he's so destroyed by these factories in the Industrial Revolution. So really, so interesting. Number 6 is The Mexican. So The Mexican is set in California, and it's about the Mexican revolutionaries in the turn of the century, I think. Maybe a bit before. I'm not quite sure. And there's one guy who is untrusted by the revolutionaries because he's so strange. He keeps to himself. And then he turns up one day and he's got bruises all over his face. And then the next day they need money. That's the main thing the revolution needs is money. And he just has like a whole load of money. And then finally they're like, we're going to run out of money. This is awful. We just need to keep us going until we can get to this guy who has tons of cash. And the Mexican says, "Will 5,000 do it? $5,000?" And they're like, "Where'd you get $5,000 from?" He's like, "I can get it." And he goes and he takes on. He's a boxer, and he goes into a prize, goes up against like the guy he's the fight before the guy's going to fight the champion. He's like the prep fight for the guy to fight the champion. And they're like, "Oh, well, you can do like an 80-20 split. You're going to get this much money," which isn't enough. It's not 5,000. He's like, "Winner takes all." And they're like, "No, but you're not going to win. Like, you want to look after..." The promoter's like, "We got to look after you, man. Like, I think you've got talent, but you're not there yet. But so you need to just take some money here, look after your family, whatever." And he's like, "No, I need 5,000. Winner takes all." And then he goes into the ring, and he's doing the fight, and the crowd are against him. They love the other boxer. The referee is giving the other boxer every advantage and every disadvantage against him. And even the promoter says that he booked loads of money on the other guy winning, and he needs to take a dive, otherwise his life is going to be hell. But he doesn't, and he keeps fighting, and he wins. And in the end, all he sees is the guns for the revolutionaries, because that's what he's fighting for. He's fighting for more than himself. Oh, it was so good. Fifth, number 5 is Love of Life. The Love of Life. And this is about a man. This is similar to The White Silence, as in a man goes through absolute hell, but he just keeps going. And I think it's this one, where literally they're walking along a river, in like they're holding their stuff above their head, and he just goes, "Ow, I think I've broken my ankle." And the other guy just walks really slowly past him, doesn't acknowledge him, and just keeps going, and just leaves him for dead. Just because, and like without even acknowledging it. And the guy's trying to catch up, and he's like crawling and crying and can't eat, and he can't. I think his gun. He runs out of he hasn't got any ammunition in his gun, and he's trying to find a safe spot where they stored more ammunition and food, and the other guy's already got there, and but he just loves life so much. He does not give up. He does not give up, and he just keeps going, and it's really inspirational as he just drags himself, kicking and screaming and crying, to survival. Number 4 is Kulau the Leper. This is another one set in Polynesia somewhere, and this is about a guy who is a leper. He has leprosy. He is a native, and the white people came on their boats and they brought their disease, and he is like in a leper colony, and he kind of looks after all these people because they have it much worse than him. And there's like a really nice peace and serenity about these lepers. And then because they've been given this island, and then the white people want the island, so they come along, and they come with their guns and their cannons, and Kulau has some weaponry for hunting and things like that, and he basically becomes Rambo and fights and kills dozens of soldiers protecting his land, his island, his people. The scene where they unleash the artillery on the lepers is brutal, like Saving Private Ryan brutal. But I just thought it was brilliant, the fact that Kulau just keeps going, and in the end it doesn't have a nice ending, but he goes out again. He goes out on his terms and he sees the stars, as his body fails him. Because that's one thing as well, is that the siege takes a long time, and as he's running out of ammo and running out of food, his leprosy is taking its toll on him as well. Number 3 is the law of life. Different from love of life. Very different, in fact, because the law of life is about an elderly Inuit man who has reached the point that he can't keep up with the tribe anymore, so they leave him behind. And he's blind, and he's like, oh, his son stays with him for a bit, which is a nice thing. He's like, thinks that as a really, his son going above and beyond as he leaves him to die in the snow. And he thinks about his life and everything that he's done, all that it's led to. He talks about how he abandoned his father in the snow, and he's just burning. He's left with a fire, and he's just burning these sticks. And then he hears the sound of wolves, and he tries to fight the wolves. This elderly blind man, and that's where the story ends. He's fighting age. He's fighting time. He's fighting the cold. He's fighting wolves. Just brilliant. Number 2 is called A Piece of Steak. This is set in Newcastle in Australia, and it's about boxing again. It's about a man who was the champion. He was up and coming. He made loads of money. He spent it all. He drunk loads. Now he's got to take this one fight to again fight the guy who's going to go on to be the champion. And he just needs the money to pay off his loans, to pay off his debts. He has to walk 5 miles to the venue because he can't afford a taxi or a horse or any other way of getting there. And the fight starts, and so much of it takes place in the fight. This is the best. Like, the Mexican's more about how it's unfair and how everyone's against him. This is about the mechanics of he's a very experienced fighter. He knows that his legs are weak. He knows that his knuckles are broken. But it's about conservation of energy. So he gets up. He makes sure every round finishes right by his stool, so he can just sit down. And the other guy has to walk all the way back across the ring. And for the first 8 rounds, he just stands there and just takes punishment and like does little nicks and things and clinches just to save his own energy. And the other guy's like full of youth and exuberance, and he does like little things so it looks like it's a hard hit, but it's not really a hard hit. He ducks his head once so the knuckles crack right on top of his head, to break the knuckles of his opponent, because that's what happened to him when he was younger. And then it's called a piece of steak because he really, really wanted some steak before the fight, just a final meal. His wife and his children go hungry to give him the food, to give him as much energy. And he talks about, I used to be able to get steak on credit from the butchers, and he has to walk past the butchers and he can't get any, they won't give him any credit. But anyway, he's fighting, and then it all turns. He lays a couple of punches, he starts to go on the attack, and he's got the guy on the ropes, he's going to knock him out. And he goes for that one punch, and because he hasn't eaten properly, because he can't afford it, because he had to walk, he hasn't got the energy in his legs, he hasn't got the energy in his fist. If he had that piece of steak that he wanted, he could have knocked him out. And he doesn't. He doesn't nail the final blow. And the guy comes back, and then it cuts to black, and he's been knocked out. And in the end, he just sits on a bench and cries. The thing is that he's not fighting his opponent. He's fighting time. He's fighting his history. He's fighting his poor life choices. He talks about how when he was up and coming, he fought this guy, and in the end, he was crying, and he was like, why are you crying? Like, I don't get it. Now he realizes that he's got debts to pay, and before he was a prize fighter for the glory, now he's a fighter for the money, and he needed it. He needed to win it. And if he'd only had that piece of steak, he would have. Incredible. Just brilliant. And then number 1 is To Build a Fire. I'd heard of To Build a Fire. I didn't really know what it was about, and it is about trying to build a fire. It's set in the north. It's about a man who has gone out on his own when it's too cold, and his body, the cold, is assaulting him and killing him, and he needs to build a fire to survive. And it's story's about 15, 20 pages, and it's just about him trying to build a fire. He can't feel his hands, so he has to keep beating them against his legs. He can't feel his feet, so he has to keep getting up and moving around. He has to bend down to concentrate on anything, and then everything seizes. He can't take his gloves off to handle the matches, otherwise they freeze. His face is completely frozen. His dog is just lingering by him, his sled dog. They went off the path. He shouldn't have gone out of town. He knew what -50 feels like. This feels colder. You shouldn't be on your own in less than -50. He knows all the choices that he's made to get here that have been incorrect. But he's just focusing on picking up matches when you can't move your fingers, and he's having to pick up matches using his knuckles, and he drops them and he drops them. And it's all the time he's just using more energy, using more body heat that he doesn't have, all to try and make a fire. If he makes this fire, he'll be able to thaw out. He'll be able to warm himself up. He'll be able to go back home. He'll be able to survive. He makes this fire eventually. He sits down. Immediately his body seizes with the temperature, but he's feeling the pure agony of his blood starting to warm up in his frostbitten feet, in his frostbitten hands, and his frostbitten face. And then there's a gust of wind, and he realizes, because he's been so focused, that he missed the fact that he had set this fire under a tree, which is covered in snow, and the snow cone falls down on him, on the fire, extinguishing it. And with that, he dies. That was his battle, was for survival, and he did everything that he could, but nature saw to it that he did not survive. And it ends with just his dog being near his frozen body for a while, and then simply getting up and wandering off back to the village. Gripping, heart-wrenching, just brilliant, just absolutely brilliant. Yeah, like those are the rankings of the 20 short stories. I really enjoyed them. Some of them better than others, as you could tell. But I love the fact that I picked up this book. I'm really, really happy I did. And there we go. If you've read any of these short stories, let me know. Please give this video a like. Please make it all the way to the end. I know it's a long one. I didn't intend it to be so long. I've given myself the hiccups. But anyway, thank you very much. And get out of my house!